Hello, everyone. Welcome to my YouTube channel. I can't stop thinking about that cold fusion prototype, and I'll tell you what, something about this whole situation just doesn't sit right with me. Everyone is talking about Ross Cullum's death, the explosions, the rescues, and who made it out alive, but I keep coming back to one simple question. Where did that prototype go? Sometimes the biggest danger isn't the villain we can see. It's the weapon that quietly disappears while everyone is celebrating that the battle is over. From the way I see it, General Hospital may have wrapped up one chapter, but it quietly opened another one that could be even more dangerous. Cullum was determined to escape with that massive truck carrying the nearly completed cold fusion prototype. That wasn't just another piece of stolen technology. It was something powerful enough to change the balance of power if it ever fell into the wrong hands. As folks like to say back home, where there's smoke, there's fire. If the writers never showed us exactly what became of it, I have a hard time believing they simply forgot. The more I think about Jack Brennan's earlier comments, the more suspicious everything becomes. He originally explained that the WSB wanted to recover the weapon because it was Caesar Faison's final project. At the time, Brennan believed he was protecting the world from a dangerous invention. What he didn't know was that Ross Cullum had already betrayed everyone and was playing both sides. Looking back now, those conversations feel completely different. They almost sound like little clues that were hiding in plain sight. What really caught my attention is how much this reminds me of the old Pikeman Security Group mess. Brennan once stood at the center of that operation before ending up in Pentonville over the illegal weapons scandal. Sure, he has moved on, but history has a funny way of refusing to stay buried. I keep asking myself whether Pikeman truly disappeared or simply went underground, waiting for the next opportunity. If that organization is still lurking in the shadows, a cold fusion weapon would be exactly the kind of prize they would chase without hesitation. Then there is the mystery surrounding the aftermath. Cullum's body was recovered, Cassius Faison reportedly survived and left with Z, and everyone scattered in different directions. Yet nobody has given us a clear answer about the prototype itself. Isn't that strange? In a story where every important object usually ends up in someone's hands, this silence feels almost intentional. That makes me believe the writers are asking us to keep our eyes open instead of putting the mystery behind us. Valentine Cassadine makes the whole puzzle even more interesting. His priority was always making sure that prototype could never be activated. He tried to dismantle it before Lisa Lobrecht was kidnapped and forced to complete the work. After everything he sacrificed, I expected the very first thing out of his mouth would be confirmation that the weapon had been destroyed for good. Instead, we got nothing. Not one clear explanation. For me, that silence speaks louder than any dramatic speech ever could. The more I replay these scenes in my mind, the more convinced I become that this isn't a forgotten plot point. It feels like a ticking clock hidden beneath everything else happening in Port Charles. If the prototype still exists, then the real endgame of this WSB story may not have happened yet. And if someone has already taken possession of it, while everyone was focused on the heroes and survivors, then I have a feeling the biggest shock is still waiting just around the corner. The more I sit with everything that happened, the more convinced I become that Z's decision to take Cassius with him is one of those moments that will end up meaning far more than it seemed at first. I don't think this was simply about capturing a criminal or cleaning up loose ends after the chaos. No, this felt calculated from beginning to end. If the reports are true that Cassius was given only two choices, face execution or work for Z, then there was never much of a choice at all. It was a survival deal, and those kinds of deals usually come with a very expensive price tag. Around here, we'd say, nothing in life comes free, and I have a feeling Cassius is about to learn exactly what that means. When I think about Cassius, I keep coming back to the fact that he isn't just another villain wandering through Port Charles. He grew up under Caesar Faison's influence, and that alone makes him incredibly dangerous. People like Caesar didn't just teach their protégés how to fight or manipulate others. They passed down secrets, scientific knowledge, contingency plans, and information that could remain valuable years after they were gone. Even if Cassius never personally completed the cold fusion project, he may understand enough about its design to point someone in the right direction. Sometimes knowing where to look is more valuable than knowing every technical detail, and I wouldn't underestimate someone who spent so much of his life around one of the smartest and most ruthless minds this show has ever introduced. That leads me to another possibility that I simply can't ignore. Maybe Z doesn't need Cassius because of who he is. Maybe he needs him because of what he remembers. If Caesar left hidden files, encrypted research, backup laboratories, or unfinished notes, who better to help recover them than someone who practically grew up in that world? The prototype may already exist, but perhaps it still requires one final breakthrough before it becomes fully operational. If that's the case, Cassius suddenly becomes one of the most valuable men alive. Not because he can pull the trigger, but because he might know how to build the gun. Of course, there is another thought that keeps circling back every time I replay these episodes in my head. What if this isn't really about finishing the prototype at all? What if the weapon is already complete, and the real objective is making sure nobody else can stop it? That's a frightening possibility because it changes the entire conversation. Instead of racing to invent something new, the people pulling the strings could simply be trying to secure exclusive control over technology that already exists. As the old saying goes, possession is 9/10 of the law. Whoever controls that prototype controls the future of this storyline. Then there is the shadow of Pikeman, and I have to admit I still don't believe that organization has completely disappeared. General Hospital has taught me over the years that powerful organizations rarely vanish forever. They adapt, they change leadership. They create new alliances, they hide behind respectable faces until the right opportunity comes along. Pikeman was deeply involved in illegal weapons operations before, so why wouldn't someone connected to that network be interested in a cold fusion weapon capable of changing the balance of power? To me, that idea makes perfect sense. In fact, it almost feels too logical to ignore. What also fascinates me is the possibility that the WSB itself may no longer be as morally clear as many characters want us to believe. Brennan originally claimed the agency wanted to secure the prototype, and perhaps that was absolutely true in the beginning. But once an intelligence organization gets its hands on something this valuable, human nature has a way of complicating everything. It is one thing to prevent terrorists or criminals from obtaining a weapon. It is something entirely different to convince yourself that your own organization should keep that same weapon because you believe only you can be trusted with it. History has shown us time and time again that power has a way of rewriting people's principles. That's exactly why Carly Spencer's observation stayed with me long after the episode ended. When she pointed out that today's WSB isn't much different from the Cassidines of years past, I honestly thought she may have delivered one of the biggest clues hidden inside the dialogue. The Cassidines always believed their dangerous inventions were justified because they convinced themselves they were serving a greater purpose. If the WSB begins thinking the same way, then the difference between hero and villain becomes much harder to recognize. Sometimes the uniform changes, but the temptation remains exactly the same. Another detail that keeps bothering me is how conveniently everyone has stopped asking about the prototype itself. We know where several characters ended up. We know who survived. We know who died. We even know that Cassius disappeared alongside Z. Yet the single object capable of causing the greatest destruction has almost faded into the background. That doesn't happen by accident in a soap like General Hospital. Whenever the writers avoid giving us a direct answer, I start paying even closer attention because that usually means they're protecting a future surprise. Loose ends in Port Charles have a funny way of becoming headline stories months later. I also can't shake the feeling that this mystery reaches far beyond just one agency or one villain. If rumors of the prototype begin spreading through the intelligence community, other powerful groups could easily enter the picture. Suddenly, this stops being a battle between the WSB and a handful of familiar enemies. It becomes a race involving people we've never even met yet, each willing to cross lines that others won't. That's the kind of storyline that can reshape the entire canvas of the show, bringing together old rivals, unexpected alliances, and betrayals that nobody sees coming. By the time I finished thinking through all these possibilities, I realized I wasn't nearly as interested in Ross Cullum's downfall as I was in everything he left behind. His story may have reached its conclusion, but the consequences certainly haven't. Cassius now stands at a crossroads that could define the next chapter of General Hospital. Z remains one of the biggest mysteries on the board. The WSB's true intentions feel increasingly uncertain, and the cold fusion prototype continues to cast a shadow over every unanswered question. If all these pieces eventually come together, I honestly believe we're heading toward one of the most explosive storylines Port Charles has seen in a very long time. And if there's one thing I've learned after watching this show for so many years, it's this. Whenever everyone believes the danger has passed, that's usually when the real storm is just beginning.